Oh, I always wanted to be a cartoon. Welcome back to another episode of the Tiny and Nate Show. Today it's just Nate and my special guest, Melinda Wade. Melinda helped me with a real estate deal recently here in Bellingham, Washington. And we got talking so much about creative finance and her own investing journey that I just said, I've got to have you on to collaborate on a podcast episode. Melinda, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Fun.
And you look great there. So it's nice that we can all do this thing. We're anywhere in the world at this point. Let's see if I can zoom. Yeah, there we are.
There we are.
Let me ask you, Melinda. Take us all the way back to young Melinda as a kid. What were you like? Did you know you were going to be a realtor at age 6?
No, not at all. I did not. I'm number 6 of 7 kids, so I didn't really know. I was in survival mode for a long time. 4 brothers,
Yeah.
I lived on a street with a bunch of boys. So I didn't really realize I was going to be a realtor with a license until way after I was involved in the real estate industry as an investor. So I'm a government worker by trade. I have a college degree, worked and made my degree, make a little bit of money for me. And then I stayed home and helped raise my 3 sons for 17 years. And that's how I got involved in investing and bought and sold tax foreclosures at that time, many times in that 17-year window of time. To just bought things, improved them, resold them. I would buy them for $1,500 and sell them for $40,000.
Wait a second. In Washington State, $1,500?
Our local counties, yes. I mostly buy raw land and remove a junk car from a piece of property and go to the dump and do some recycling. Really improves the value of a piece of property. So that's what I did. My kids have a real big exposure to what sweat equity means.
Yeah, I suppose
and
so.
My youngest son just got his license in the state of California, so he's investigating what I've been doing and interested in moonlighting a little bit from his job when he has some downtime.
Melinda, what I didn't catch in that story was that trigger point where you weren't an investor, then you became an investor. Did someone just say, hey, you can go on these auctions and buy $1,500 land? How did that happen?
I worked in city, county, and state government. So I did know while I was an employee there that they had these auctions on the last Friday, or actually the first Friday of the month of December in the county where I worked. They had a half a dozen people come into a room and there was an auction going on. And they might have 10 to 50 properties at that time. So one time after I quit working there and when I was staying home, I was looking for something to invest in. I called the treasurer's office and asked when the auction was again, because I couldn't remember. And I went to the auction. And I think for $800 that day, I bought a piece of property on a river.
My gosh, $800 on a river?
Mm-hmm. And so the money came from my kids' school bank accounts, and that property became 3 boys. And so we sold that property 2 years later for $37,000. So that was put into a bank account. So when they got to buy a house, they got a little money out of the 3 boys account when they bought their homes. So that's was there. I mean, they had, I think, $900 combined in their school banking accounts, earning no interest at the time.
Got it.
So that's pretty good financing in its own sort of way a long time ago. But I didn't have a real estate license then. I didn't get a real estate license till I was 50. So I was just looking for things to invest in that I could afford as a stay-at-home mom at that time. And then that kind of mushroomed. That little tax foreclosure project bloomed into 37 different purchases that I rolled around for a few years. We built a nice cabin on 5 acres. And then one day I saw an ad in the article in the Seattle Times that the Nature Conservancy bought 90 acres next to some property that I had, 35 acres. And I owned on the river, and they didn't have any river frontage. So I wrote them a letter, and they ended up buying the property, and I made a nice return on my money, and we had some really great times. And I was able to retain my cabin lot out of that property so we can continue to enjoy that property as well. But the financing part, I'm always looking for ways to buy directly, if I'm a consumer, directly from the seller. So most all of those lots that I bought, I bought 37 that were all contiguous, but a really weird shape in themselves, which totaled 35 acres. And so all those were purchased off market just by talking to people. A neighbor knows somebody who doesn't want a piece of property anymore. And especially when they look a little downtrodden, that is a signal for me. My little antenna goes off, and then I have to figure out how to find the people to approach them to say, hey, I have this little wad of money that I could make a down payment on this property. You get to be the bank, just like Bank of America. You'll have a deed of trust, so you'll have interest in the property until I pay you off in full. If I stop paying, you get the property back. Isn't that a great investment? You know, if you lose money in the stock market, you don't get your money back. But if you take me on and I make a considerable down payment, 25% maybe, you could get that and keep that if I stop paying you. So,
do you think, Melinda, most investors today know that that's even a thing that they can do?
Not really. And a lot of people in my have a real estate license don't even know about it or how to do it. In my office of 150 agents, if somebody has to write a seller financed offer, they call me. What forms do I use? How do I write that up? The office tells them to call me. How to put that into motion so that the offer, there's not a financing contingency, there's a payment terms contingency, and there's some other documents you get from the bar association and that kind of thing include. So it's what I'm always looking for when I'm looking to buy something. Seller financing saves a ton on loan fees. There are none, unless the seller wants to charge, like, I don't know. They don't ever want to charge you any kind of a fee. They just, if you can explain it to them and you understand what you're doing and help them understand what you're trying to do, it works out. If you have reasonable people.
Why would someone want to do that? Why would a seller want to do that? What's the benefit to them? I think I understand the benefit to you as the buyer or investor, which is, no bank fees. We don't have to go through credit checks and blah, blah, blah. It's just some paperwork to write up a mortgage note that's secured by the deed of trust, which you're going to own the deed, but they're going to own the mortgage note. But what's the benefit to the seller? Why would they ever want to do that?
Benefit to the seller is, say, for instance, they're downsizing and they've made a bunch of money off the sale of that property that you're trying to buy. They don't have to take all that money in 1 year. It's a less of a burden on their taxes. So they're not getting, $500,000 all at one time. I could stretch it out over 10 years, and that's a big relief on their tax burden. So that's a big benefit to them. And sometimes they just like to know who you are. They like to know what you're doing with the property. They like to see what you're going to build there. They like to see what you're going to improve it. Maybe they had big ideas for it that they could never pull off, and you're going to bring them into fruition. Oftentimes I have a relationship with the seller, and they're cheering me on in the back row there somewhere. But mostly it's to save them from the tax burden of having the money come all at one time. That's what their benefit is, and they're happy about that.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to have to
in your experience, when you bought on seller terms, are you usually paying some sort of an interest payment to them, or are you just agreeing on a monthly amount?
Yes. Rule of thumb is it's about 1% above what you can get out there at a bank. Yeah. And for me, oh my, how that's cheaper than hard money, especially if it's raw land. Raw land loans are hard to come by. And especially if they don't have water, well, I might not care that it doesn't have water because maybe I own the next door one that does have water and power. So, you know, it's an easier way. That hard money is expensive and usually very short term. And you can sometimes get really favorable terms on seller financing. So,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
I have
Maybe
a note
the
right
sellers.
now that's 10 years. That's unheard of for me for a note. But
Yeah.
3 to 5
Yeah.
is common. 3 to 5 is common.
Okay.
And if the property is in dilapidated condition and it can't get a traditional loan,
Mm-hmm.
seller financing is a great option for a short term so that the buyer, me, can get it into a nice condition that it can qualify for a better terms loan down the road.
Right, right. And this is actually something that I just did. I was super
Yes.
inspired by you in our past conversations. And so
Yes.
the current flip I'm working on in Bellingham, we paid 10% down to the seller.
Yep. Yep.
And then we're making, $1,500 a month payments to them for 7 months. It takes us
Only
about 3 to
7.
4,
Yeah.
3 to 4 months to flip it, right?
Right.
And so a 7-month term is a conservative and safe window to
Yes.
then pay them out from the flip. After, let's say we go on market in 3 months, takes us a month to close and sell. We're in for 4 or 5 months, and then they'll get paid back. But the big benefit again on that side is they got to charge me interest, right?
Yes. 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 And it's a win-win. It's a win for the seller. It's a win for the buyer. It's a trust relationship, and the deed of trust is the same document that any of the mortgage companies are going to use. So they're in a really secure position. And what kind of an investment is that secure that they might get the whole property back? And you don't have, that seller doesn't have to pay you back anything. So you put a well on the property. So you put a road on there. You pull the utilities on the property. That's what the buyer is out for not performing. And if the seller has to foreclose, those things are the things he gets to keep. He or she gets to keep. So,
Keeps my down payment, keeps my improvements,
sure,
and
all
keeps
that.
keeps any payments I've made him, and then he can resell that property in the future.
It's a great investment opportunity for a seller. It is.
Yeah. So for me as the buyer, a risk factor is if you don't want to default. So you make sure you get a long enough term that you can exit whatever that exit plan is. If you're going to build on raw land, you're going to need more time than if you're going to do a cosmetic flip, right?
Yes. And the payments are not frightening for you, the buyer.
Right. So typically hard money or even banks will require you have so many months of payments in the bank to be prepared in that process while you're making that flip. I'm curious if you know of any other risks that I, as the buyer buying on creative terms, should pay attention to.
A real estate contract is not the same as a deed of trust and a promissory note. And a real estate.
Okay, I'm with you.
A real estate contract keeps the name of the seller on the deed until the whole contract is paid off. The buyer's name is not on the deed. In a deed of trust, the buyer is on the deed with the seller as a trustee. So there's a lien for whatever is owed, but at least the buyer's name is on there. So a lot of people call a real estate contract, I think they mean deed of trust, but that's an old term and those are not used anymore. They are like from the 70s and the 80s, but they're not used anymore. So just be sure what kind of a contract you're getting into. That's pretty important.
Yeah.
As a buyer, it's more advantageous for a seller to have a real estate contract, but as a buyer, I wouldn't do it. My very first home when I was 23, $75,000, bought on seller financing, and it was a little dilapidated and it needed to get into financeable condition. And we had a 3-year note and I had a 30-year payment. So my payment was like $362 a month, because that's what I could really afford at that time, because I had to spend, I think I spent $35,000 in doing improvements to it so I could get a traditional loan. Turns out it was in Kirkland, in a really desirable area. I was able to sell it in just under 3 years and double my money, so I didn't have to get another mortgage on it, or another loan on it. But just the terms can be whatever you and the seller agree upon. The
Right.
elderly couple that sold it to me didn't need the money, and they surely didn't want it all at one time. And I was shocked they would take like $363 a month as my house payment. That's low.
Because they amortized that loan over 30 years, but you got to pay it all off within 3 years. Is that right? It's a 3-year note.
Yes, it's a 30-year amortization payment and a 3-year balloon payment. So, at the end, I had hardly paid anything down on it because I was paying to do all the improvements to the property.
Right. Right.
But you can make the terms really favorable to you if the seller's
absolutely.
okay.
It's kind of like the wild, wild west, whatever you both are comfortable with, right?
Yes. Yes.
So
yes.
On that deal, that it sounds like you paid $75,000 for that
yes.
with the elderly couple. Do you remember what you sold it for, or did you eventually sell it?
In about 28 months, I sold it for $155,000. Yeah. And I got to live there. So I really got paid to live there.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
100% return on investment. Well, not exactly, because I'm sure you put a lot into the repairs of that.
30 was the amount. I kept it at 30.
Yeah.
30,000. Yeah. So about 105 to come up with. Yeah, I did well.
So I don't know if you've ever read the book by Robert Kiyosaki called Cash Flow Quadrants, but he describes the different mindsets.
Yes.
So one of the things I find fascinating about you is you came from a government employee background, but then you've gone, which is the E quadrant, which that mindset, at least according to Robert's philosophy, is that mindset tends to seek security and a good job, good pension. You get the idea. But you've gone out into the E quadrant as an entrepreneur, small business owner, as well as an investor, the I quadrant. So I'm curious if you had to break yourself of any mindset things along the way that allowed you to do that, because I know before I got into investing, I think there was a lot of fear around it.
My father was a self-employed individual. He owned a dairy of 55 cows on a 40-acre tract of land. And there wasn't much left over at the end of the month for my mom to go buy groceries. And we had a huge garden, and my dad was a hunter, and we were gatherers, and we canned a lot of vegetables and fruits and grew everything. And somehow my dad was able to amass about a dozen pieces of real estate in his lifetime with, I don't know what he had for money. It felt like he had $5. He would buy he bought a 17-acre little farm in January from a man who didn't speak English, very nice, in Whatcom County off Highway 9. And we wondered what all those big snowdrifts were, because we all 9 of us drove up there in my dad's international truck, or I don't know. We had a pink Cadillac at that time too.
Snowdrifts. What were they? Now you've got a mystery.
It was a 17-acre working raspberry farm, but that didn't come across in any of the language. So when we went back in April after it thawed out, we were all of a sudden in the business of picking and growing raspberries and taking them to the cannery.
He accidentally bought a raspberry farm?
Yeah, it had a house and a little barn on it. 17 acres on the Samish River. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hey, he made some really good decisions about real estate. He bought an 80-acre piece that has beautiful views in Skagit County, up on an area called Bayview Hill, near the Bayview State Park up at the top. And he just made some really good decisions. We worked to help clear 40 of that 80 acres, and he ran cattle on there. In the summer months we did. And so he was the example for investing. The land could always take care of you in his mind. If you got down to your last piece of land, you could live on it, grow something to feed you on it, house you. But
Right.
if you owned more, and this is what I have learned in the real estate industry too, I can sell a lot of pieces of real estate and help buyers buy a lot of pieces of real estate. And it can make me quite a bit of money. But the real money is made by acquiring properties that my name is on the deed. And it doesn't really
Right.
matter too much about what it is. And it seems like for myself, it's always at a time when I don't have the money available necessarily. When I'm really looking and I feel like I have the money, I can't find anything. And then all of a sudden something appears and I just figure out how to make it happen. And I think that comes from my dad, because I do not know how he made these places happen. Stuff was cheap then, okay, 80 years
Right.
ago. But
Right.
I mean, I remember when I was going to college, he told me that he bought a John Deere riding lawnmower, and it wasn't any big thing, but he bought that and paid more for that than he paid for the 80 acres on Bayview Hill.
Oh my goodness.
I know. So he was aghast at how much a little John Deere riding mower cost him. So, you know, if you really want to make something happen, you just make it happen. And the creative financing I'm always looking for is seller financing. And my dad did the same. He bought directly from the owner every time. Even the place with the snowdrifts, there was somehow some paperwork that must have happened, probably at the escrow and title company. But it was a handshake. He dealt on a handshake, and I believe in the handshake today, but that means something. So, and it doesn't always take a lot of money. It takes an agreement between you and somebody else. And whatever that agreement is, if you both agree, you just have to hold up your end of the deal.
Yeah.
And that's where a handshake is important to me. Sometimes
the handshake, but like you said, there's still going to be title and escrow, right? So the deed's still going to be,
of course.
So you have that central entity still to protect one another.
Right. And a contract. But I guess what I mean is, if I say I'm going to do something, some people get themselves I got my license in 2010 when the market was in the toilet. So I immediately began working with foreclosures and short sales because there was nobody else I could really be working with. The owner of my office at that time, he had the Bank of America accounts and he had the HUD accounts. I was a new agent. That wasn't going to come my way. So I had to figure out how to work the foreclosure and pre-foreclosure folks. And so, you know, there was a lot of money being handed out to people who probably shouldn't have gotten it at that time. And we called them drive-through loans. You could just drive through the drive-through window and say, hey, I wrote an offer on a house today and I'm going to get you guys to do the loan. And they'd loan you 125% of value and it would work out. That's crazy stuff. And people didn't follow through, couldn't follow through. They're one sneeze out of the poorhouse. You know, one of the two of them gets sick and they can't make the mortgage. And, you know, that is something that, you know, a deed of trust and a promissory note are an important document. And I take those seriously. And I think we were a little too cavalier with the money. And I worry a little bit now. I know the forbearance just came to a halt at the end of December, and tomorrow I'm going on my first short sale appointment of the year.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Do you think that foreclosures are back in Washington State?
I think they're going to be showing up because there was no foreclosure going on during the forbearance time frame. So I think they'll be showing up. Yeah.
I want to end with this. Thank you so much for hearing your story. Now that you are a agent as well as an investor, I'm sure you've helped a lot of people buy or sell homes. And probably the majority of us are just happy enough to, you know, get a home, live in a home. But I'm curious what you've done to help your clients take that next step to not just own their own home, but to become real estate investors as well. What does that conversation look like? Have any of your clients succeeded in taking that next step?
Yes, actually, I have a a few people who I meet directly with who have had successful flips, and I'm identifying things for them all over the area, and they're all in different varying levels of risk. Some only want to paint and mow the grass. Some will jack up foundations. And so I'm always watching, like the property I'm going to at the short sale appointment tomorrow. I already have a couple people who I'm thinking about might be of interest for that property. Maybe you, Nathan. So
there you go. Yeah. Does it need a foundation and a roof?
No. But it's a 60s home, and I have no idea how much updating, if any, that it has had. So
I love the 60s ranches. The 60s ranches are my jam.
Okay. Right. Maybe we'll be talking soon. Okay.
It's just such a fun game. I think that's what's so cool to me about real estate is there's always something else to learn. Lots of interesting people out there doing it. And one of the reasons we're doing this podcast is to document our own learning and journey of becoming real estate investors, but also to interview interesting people like yourself that have been doing it for years and have even better stories than we do. So
my final note is you can't talk to enough people and let them know your dream.
Right.
Keep talking about your dream, because your dreams are just your goals. And the more people you tell about them, the more they'll come true.
Right.
Keep telling people about them, because just telling is the accountability.
I love that.
Telling is
Melinda, if somebody's watching this and they want to connect with you more, either they've got something they need to sell or something they want to buy, or they want to learn more about your investing journey or come alongside you as you go into those foreclosure meetings, do you want to share a way that they can get a hold of you? Can they find you either on Instagram or an email? What do you want to share for how people can reach out to you?
MelindaWade.com.
MelindaWade.com?
That's the easiest for people to remember. MelindaWade.com. I'm
going to put that at the bottom here. MelindaWade.com. If you guys want to connect with Melinda further and talk about buying and selling real estate, either your own home, Whatcom, Skagit counties, those are your primary, as well as
Lane to Bellevue. I actually have some South Seattle stuff going right now. Just depends. I'm happy to help.
Nice. Love it.
Nice.
Melinda, thanks for joining us for the podcast today. Let me know about that short sale. If it's a 1960s ranch, I want to get an offer in.
Okay. We'll be talking.
Good talking. Have a good one.
Okay.
Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye.